In this movie, I'll introduce you to the advanced controls that are available to you when creating a new document. They're not really any more advanced than what we've seen so far. They just happen to reside in an area of the dialog box called Advanced. I'll go up to the File menu and choose the New command to bring up my new document dialog box. And I'll go ahead and call this document 8-page newsletter, because that's what it's going to be. And I'll go ahead and change the number of artboards to 8 as well, and change the number of columns to 4 so that the artboards are arranged in 4 columns and 2 rows. Now I'm going to switch back to the default unit of measure, points, just so that I can show you that you can override the unit of measure anytime you like. So notice that Illustrator's gone ahead and converted all of my inch settings back to points, which is why now my artboards are going to be 432 points wide and 576 points tall. I'm kind of thinking the spacing value is going to be a little bit too high. I'd like to change it to 1/4 inch, but let's say I don't know what 1/4 inch is in points. Well, all you have to do is dial in 0.25 in like that, and then press Tab. It'll automatically convert to a different unit of measure. Or I could even dial in millimeters if I want, 100 mm, for example, then press Tab, and Illustrator goes ahead and converts it to 283.46 points. Who would have known? But 1/4 inch is probably closer to what I want. Another way to do it is to dial in 0.25 double quote, and then press the Tab key, converts it over to 18 points. So pretty much anything you think you should be able to do, you can. There are so many different ways to indicate these units of measure. I can even dial in a fraction if I want to, like 1/3 double quote. That'll go ahead and give me 1/3 of an inch, and that converts over to 24 point. Here are the advanced options. To see them, you just click on this arrowhead in order to expand the dialog box. And notice that we've got a total of 4 new options in all. The first allows me to change my color space. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and the key color black, which are the inks most commonly used in commercial printing. RGB stands for red, green, blue, which is the color space employed by your monitor. So typically it works like this. If you're creating a document for print, you want CMYK. If you're creating a web graphic, something that's going to be displayed on a screen, or an illustration that you want to bring over into Photoshop or Flash, then you want to select RGB. I'm going to stick with CMYK. Next, we have our raster effects. Now, raster means pixels. And the most common raster effect, we'll see lots of them in a future chapter, but the most common one is the drop shadow. And it's just more efficient to render a drop shadow using pixels instead of vector-based outlines. So you want to specify what the resolution of your drop shadows and other typically soft effects are going to be. Now, if you're creating screen art, then 72 ppi is fine. If you're creating a print document, presumably you'd want high-resolution imagery. The problem is it'll take longer for Illustrator to render those drop shadows and other pixel effects. In which case, if the program is behaving sluggishly, you may want to switch that down to medium, 150 ppi. Again, you're probably not going to see that lower resolution because you're working with a soft effect like a drop shadow, so you don't need a lot of pixels in the first place. That's what I'm going to do, is switch over to medium here. Next, we have the preview mode. And by default, you're just going to see a standard illustration preview on screen, just as you would expect. If you're creating graphics for the web, or for devices like the iPad, iPhone, and so forth, then you probably want to see a pixel preview. That way you can see how your vector art aligns to the actual pixels that it will ultimately become. And then finally, for some commercial output, you may want to switch to overprint. What that means is if you're overprinting a cyan object on top of a magenta object, for example, you can see that they will overprint to produce a deep blue. But if you don't use overprinting, it's just an option available to you, then you might as well leave the preview mode set to default. And then finally, we've got this checkbox, Align New Objects to Pixel Grid, which is perfect if you're creating web designs, that kind of thing, anything that's going to the screen ultimately. If you're not going to the screen, this is a print document after all, then you don't need to worry about it. And now I'll go ahead and click OK in order to create that new 8-page document with the artboards arranged in 4 columns and 2 rows. And that's how you take advantage of the more advanced settings inside the new document dialog box.